Captain Richard Beaudette. Please step forward if you can. Captain Richard Beaudette.
As a high school student at Humboldt High in West St. Paul, Minnesota, Richard Beaudette was an accomplished gymnast. His training and conditioning as a gymnast held him in good stead when, as an 18-year-old, he was drafted into the U.S. Army. Richard did not mind being drafted. As he puts it, we all wanted to go to war and get with it. Sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama, he soon rose to infantry platoon leader, responsible for getting his unit into peak physical shape. Richard was assigned to the 63rd AAA Gun Battalion and sent to Germany towards the close of the war. As a cleanup crew, his battalion faced many German units that Richard called diehards because they fanatically fought to the bitter end. This was some of the fiercest fighting of the war, as the Germans were to the point of suicidal. Richard recalls that the attitude of the men in his unit was that they had a job to do and they were living minute to minute. After VE Day, the 63rd was disbanded, and they were sent back to the States. The trip home had an unusual twist to it, as they were being transported on the Royal Canadian destroyer HMCS Cayuga, which is known for the ship where Ferdinand Damara was masquerading as a surgeon. Damara's story was made into a movie starring Tony Curtis called The Great Imposter. Soon after returning to St. Paul, Richard went to work for a roofing company owned by the father of a high school acquaintance, Rose Marie. After reconnecting with her and dating for a period of time, they were married in St. Paul. Still a part of the Army Reserves, Richard was called back to service 4.5 years later to serve in the Korean War. Upon being stationed on the island of Sokto, Richard received his rank as captain. His duties in the Korean War were to go behind enemy lines, locate enemy gun emplacements, and report locations to U.S. warships for aerial and ship-based attack strikes. This was harrowing work, but the thing that made it even more dangerous is that these missions were conducted by Richard and his group of 30 North Korean guerrillas. He remembers with some fondness that a 13-year-old North Korean boy was his guide and took care of him on these missions. When asked how he slept at night with this group, he replied, "I slept like a baby. If they wanted to kill me, they had all the chances they needed." One night, when returning from patrol, Richard spotted a U.S. pilot bailing from his airplane. It was nearly dark, and he knew that this pilot was going to land in a fast-moving river, and by then it would be pitch black. So using his trajectory skills, he calculated a spot downstream where he believed the pilot would be by the time a boat could rescue him. He got the boat moving and had the men hit the spotlight on the spot he had calculated. When they turned on the light, the pilot was right there, and they were able to pull him from the water and keep him from drowning. The pilot was relieved but apprehensive when he discovered that he had been rescued by North Koreans. He did not know that this was Richard's unit until a voice from the back of the boat said in plain English, "Don't they teach you how to fly those darn things?" And when things settled down and the pilot realized he was in friendly hands, he was so grateful that he asked Richard if he needed anything. Anything. Richard joked about the fact that he could use some new socks, underwear, and shirts. The only things he really needed. About 2 weeks later, a package was delivered to Richard. When he opened it, he found new socks, underwear, and shirts, and a big thank you from the rescued pilot. After Korea, Richard's one question was, where are we going to fight next? And although fighting was not in his future, he was stationed in Germany in the late 50s. It was at this point he unfortunately split with his wife Rose Marie. But after spending several more years in Germany and eventually meeting his soon-to-be second wife, Elizabeth, Richard was sent back to the States to end his 14-plus years of service in El Paso, Texas. Richard worked at a lot of things after his service, from opening his own bar in El Paso, to doing survey work for the state of Nevada, to construction, and finally retiring from his glass shop in the mid-'80s. Richard has 3 children, 11 grandchildren, and now enjoys spending time with his family, swimming at the community pool, and socializing with other veterans at the local pub. Richard wants it to be known that the only true heroes are the ones who did not come back.